Good evening. See, no, I'm trying to be Alfred Hitchcock, and I'm turning out to be Bela Lugosi, and any imitation I try to do after 2 sentences turns into the Swedish chef anyway. So it's, I want to drink your blood, heffany blurny blurny, so I just shouldn't even try. But tomorrow, 2 Hitchcock classics. I push Hitchcock a lot here because I keep watching these movies. I not only recommend them, I say, well, let me just watch a few minutes of North by Northwest. Impossible. And tomorrow night, 2 of the absolute best, The Birds and Psycho. So, yeah, try and eat just one. Just try and go for one scene and see if you're not stuck there. So at Turner Classic Movies, no commercials, no editing. It's a great way to spend the night.
But let's just start with that shower sequence, which really is one of the best shot and edited sequences in movie history. Everything's been meticulously planned by Hitchcock, including that point of view shot of the shower, to get us into Janet Leigh's perspective before the awful murder. And there's that awful, ominous shot of Mrs. Bates appearing from behind the shower curtain, obscured. And then, of course, once the murder begins, we start right away with a really ahead of its time double jump in on Janet Leigh's face and mouth. All the violence here is achieved through the editing or through the movement in the frame, not through any actual graphic violence. There's no actual shots of a knife touching flesh at all in the sequence. It's about the angles of the shots and how they are placed against each other that give the impression of violence and contact. I really remember the first time I saw this film being disturbed, that moment when she turns around in the shower and you feel like the knife is stabbing against her back. It's horrible. This scene was always central to the film for Hitchcock. In fact, the reason the whole film is in black and white is so that Hitchcock wouldn't need to show the colour of blood in this scene, which would have meant he would have got it past the censors. Cuts in editing, of course, can be aggressive acts, something I talk in a little bit more detail on my programme on Bunwell. And I suppose I should also point out that 2 of the examples I've used in this series involve violence towards women, which is a whole other subject I'm not going to go into right now. So I'm going to talk about another scene in Psycho, which involves violence towards a balding, middle-aged man. This is a scene where cutting, or being aware of editing, is actually problematic for the director, as opposed to being something he's using for an opportunity, which leads to a situation where Hitchcock doesn't even use a cut at all, which is a piece of brilliant editing in itself. It's understanding the editing process. I'll explain in more detail. To do that, we have to look at the murder of the detective, Arbogast, and here it is. Now, that high angle that Hitchcock cuts to is there for a reason, not just because it's disturbing, but because Hitchcock's having to hide, spoiler alerts, the identity of the murderer. He knew that if he was to shoot it from the back, it would say to the audience, I'm deliberately trying to hide the identity here. So he cuts to this overhead shot so he can give the sequence some dynamism, but at the same time disguise the fact that he's cutting to avoid showing faces. So a little bit later in the film, Hitchcock has the same problem, but he can't use the same solution. The scene is when Norman Bates is taking his mum down to the fruit cellar, and again, Hitchcock has to hide identities, so he needs that overhead shot, but he can't cut to the overhead shot again. It's not a dynamic sequence. If he cuts to this overhead shot, it'll look to the audience like he's deliberately trying to hide the identities here. So Hitchcock comes up with a solution, which is to create a shot without a cut, to turn it into a fluid shot, a wonderful dynamic fluid shot, with this camera creeping up the stairs and taking this overhead position before Norman Bates takes his mum down to the fruit cellar. And then Hitchcock fills the space while the camera's travelling with some wonderful dialogue to keep the audience occupied while the move's happening. All of this is being done just to prevent having a simple cut that would reveal too much for the audience. It's a whole process of editing that Hitchcock's actually thought through before the first day of shooting on the film's even begun. It just shows the genius of the man. As Hitchcock himself said, it was exciting to use the camera to deceive the audience, and that's something they could write on his gravestone. And it also goes to show that sometimes the best cutting comes when there isn't a cut at all. And that's the genius of this shot. Here it is again.
Now, Mother, I'm gonna bring something up.
I am sorry, boy, but you do manage to look ludicrous when you give me orders.
Please, Mother.
No, I will not hide in the fruit cellar. You think I'm fruity, huh? I'm staying right here. This is my room and no one will drag me out of it. Least of all my big, bold son.
They'll come now, Mother. He came after the girl, and now someone will come after him. Mother, please, it's just for a few days. Just for a few days so they won't find you.
Just for a few days. In that dark, dank fruit cellar. No! You hid me there once, boy, and you won't do it again. Not ever again. Now get out! I told you to get out, boy.
I'll carry you, Mother.
Norman, what do you think you're doing? Don't you touch me. Don't! Norman! Put me down. Put me down.